Right, and you can use the microphone. Turn it on and speak into it. Close.
Oh, yeah.
Sound. All right, can everyone hear me? Oh, turn this off. Maybe with a blower off.
I think, yeah, you have to hold it close and speak right into
No,
it.
it's not.
Yes, sir. It might be.
Oh, my ears are bad.
Hold it closer.
Okay, there you go. Here we go. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this July 16th, 2024 meeting of the Madison Planning and Zoning Commission to order and read the ground rules for this meeting. The courts have adopted a policy of fundamental fairness to assure that every interested party is given a fair opportunity to hear, review, submit, and comment on the testimony and evidence that the Planning and Zoning Commission will ultimately use to render a decision. The applicant's presentation should not have time limits imposed, as it is the applicant's burden to lay out all the facts that would support an approval. The public must be allowed to speak at a public hearing. However, the chair may place reasonable limits on the privilege to keep speakers on topic and within time limits. 5 minutes is recommended when there are large audiences. The courts have made it clear that public sentiment is not a proper basis for a decision. The Planning and Zoning Commission must simply determine whether an application complies with the applicable regulations. Therefore, the chair may limit comments that will not help in that determination, such as personal attacks on the character of the applicant or statements regarding matters outside of the agency's proper jurisdiction. All speakers, including commissioners, must be recognized by the chair before being allowed to speak. As a reminder, we on the commission are here to listen and to ask questions of the applicant. We should refrain from conversations with attendees. I ask that all cell phones be silenced during the meeting. During the public hearing, I insist that we treat each other respectfully and follow the required structure of the meeting. The following steps for conducting a public hearing are: step 1, the applicant will be invited to present the application, explaining to the commission and attendees what is being requested. The applicant or staff will share all application materials on the screen as needed. Comments of town agencies will be read for each application if there are any. Step 2, commissioners will ask clarifying questions. Before speaking, each commissioner will be recognized by the chair. Step 3, attendees will have an opportunity for clarifying questions and comments. Anyone who wishes to speak must raise their hand and be recognized by the chair before they speak. For Zoom attendees, please raise your hand through the Zoom platform and wait to be called on and unmuted. As this public hearing must be recorded, attendees will state their names and addresses before asking their questions or making statements. Step 4, the applicant will have an opportunity to address any questions or concerns raised by the public or commissioners and must be given the opportunity to speak again without interruption. Once the public hearing is closed, the applicant is free to leave or remain for the balance of the regular meeting, during which the commission will try to reach a decision on each application. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decision of this commission and has a right to appeal to Superior Court if desired. Decisions of this meeting are available the day after the meeting by calling the Land Use Department at 203-245-5631 after 9 a.m. Seated this evening are commission members: Jeff Downs, maybe raise our hands when I call you, we're doing alphabetically. John Duza, John Morgan, Bob O'Connor on Zoom, and Janet Peckinpah on Zoom, Bob Reinhardt, Andy Rubin, and myself, Carol Snow, Chair. Staff present this evening is Aaron Mannix, our town planner. This meeting is live streamed on YouTube and will be made available on the town website for viewing, and the town planner will now read the legal notice. Aaron, over to you.
Thank you. Notice is hereby given that the Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a special meeting for a public hearing on Tuesday, July 16th, 2024, beginning at 6 p.m. in Meeting Room A, the James Madison Room, Town Campus, 8 Campus Drive, Madison, Connecticut, 06443. Overflow seating will be available in Meeting Room C, the Hammonasset Room at Town Campus. This is a hybrid meeting, and attendees may also join via Zoom webinar through either the webinar link or call-in information below. The webinar ID is 915-8196-6735. The password is 452138. The call-in number is 1-646-558-8656. The following application hearing will reconvene. 24-10, 6 Opening Hill Road and Indigo Trail, map 70, lots 1-1 and 1-14, zone RU1, owner applicant Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation, Inc., special exception pursuant to section 5.4A and 3.4C for philanthropic and educational use of the property, which use includes arts, architecture, and other philanthropic and educational exhibits, meetings, tours, on-site residencies, events, studio, and collaborative space, applicant's administrative office, and a museum/gallery store. All is more specifically and fully set forth in the statement of use and project description as amended, which is included with the application and on file with the Planning and Zoning Commission. This meeting is continued from May 16th, 2024 and June 20th, 2024. Copies of this application are available for inspection in the Land Use Office. Further details on how to participate in the webinar are posted on the Town of Madison website, MadisonTV.org. All written correspondence can be submitted to the Land Use Department via email, landuse@MadisonTV.org. Dial 203-245-5631 for assistance. Dated at Madison, Connecticut, this 3rd day of July, 2024, Carol Snow, Chair. This was published in The Source on July 11th, 2024.
Thank you, Erin. And I want to apologize to Mike Bogda. I didn't see that you came in. I was expecting you to sit here. So we have another Commissioner, Mike Bogda, to introduce to you all.
Thank you, Karen.
I also want to just do a quick recap on the scheduling. The public hearing was open May 16th and continued to June 20th, but then further continued an extension granted to this special meeting on July 16th, for which the legal notice was posted on July 5th and printed in the Source on July 11th. And I anticipate that it may go on beyond tonight, but we'll see how the evening goes. And before we invite the applicant to present, there is one more matter to be addressed regarding requests from opponents that I recuse myself. So I'd like to read the following statement. Several Madison residents have expressed their concerns of possible conflict of interest and bias in my role as chair of the Madison Planning and Zoning Commission for this application. Their emails are now part of the record for the application for 24-10 6 Opening Hill Road. Therefore, I feel compelled to respond for the record. First, I grew up in Madison, graduated from Daniel Hand High School, and I am familiar with the Opening Hill Road neighborhood. I'm honored to serve as second-generation chair of the Madison Planning and Zoning Commission, which currently consists of 9 dedicated members from diverse professional backgrounds that inform our discussions and decisions. Second, I worked for over 40 years in the field of conservation of cultural heritage, not environmental conservation, for major museums, government, and private clients, as well as on archaeological sites around the Mediterranean. I worked at the Yale University Art Gallery from 2008 until my retirement in 2019. At no time during my long career did I benefit financially or know anyone from the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation. Third, my introduction to the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation occurred during their informal discussion at the March 7th, 2024 Madison Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, when Foundation President Michelle Napick provided background information via Zoom. In sum, there is no conflict of interest. I bring experience, knowledge, and an open mind, not bias, in reviewing this application and any application that comes before the Madison Planning and Zoning Commission. So Erin, I'd like to pass this down to you for the public record. And with that taken care of, I would like to invite will-be Attorney McKeon to continue presentation of this application.
Thank you. Do I need the mic?
Yes, I would recommend using the mic. Thank you.
Should be on.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Chris McKeon. My law firm is located at 900 Chapel Street in New Haven. I'm a resident of Madison as well. I live on Hotchkiss Lane. I've lived in the town since 1995, which is almost 30 years, as I was just calculating. A couple of preliminary matters, but I do want to introduce our speakers tonight. With me is Michelle Napick, the president of the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation, and Rini Bisau, also with the foundation. Mike Ott is our civil engineer from Summerhill Civil Engineers and Land Surveyors. He is attending by Zoom. He will review and discuss the site plan and septic design.
Excuse me, Attorney McKeon, could you speak louder? I'm getting word that it's a little harder to hear. We just hold it
Okay.
nice and
Is that
close.
better?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So Mike Ott is our civil engineer. He will be reviewing and going through the site plan and septic system design that he did, and which was submitted yesterday or this morning. Nina Peak is the U.S. Manager of Planning from SLR International Corporation. She's also a certified planner, American Institute of Certified Planners. Dave Sullivan is the U.S. Manager of Traffic and Transportation. By the way, Nina will be presenting via Zoom. Dave Sullivan, also with SLR International Corporation, is the U.S. Manager of Traffic and Transportation Planning. He has submitted a traffic study, which is of record, but Dave is here in person to present. Last but not least is Mark Nadeau, who is a real estate appraiser who has done a valuation impact study, which is also of record, and he is here to summarize and present that. Just a couple of items preliminarily that I wanted to follow up with. As you recall, last meeting, we had presented our application and the uses and described them, but at the commission's request, we yielded to allow Attorney Pellegrino to present at least a portion of the position of some of the neighborhood and folks who are opposing the application. Some of the things I didn't get to is what I'd like to accomplish now. The first is I'd like to introduce into evidence a copy of the title insurance policy that insures the title to the real estate that is owned by the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation. And the purpose of that is to indicate that the deed restrictions, which are referenced in the PowerPoint and are referenced in a number of letters to the commission, with the suggestion or allegation that by applying for the uses we are seeking to implement at the site, we're breaching a deed restriction that says that the properties can only be used for single-family residences. The title policy here confirms that those restrictions do not apply to the 6 Opening Hill parcel. You'll note that our application includes 2 parcels. The 6 Opening Hill parcel is a large 6-acre parcel, and then there's a small strip of land that is not nearly big enough to be a building lot, but it is part of the ownership that the foundation has, and it's a narrow strip along Indigo Trail that the deed restrictions include in the legal description. So there's an argument to be made that that little strip of land is subject to the deed restrictions. I don't think it's a good argument because the deed restrictions apply to the lots in the subdivision known as Indigo Woods. And many who may live in subdivisions know that there are usually and typically restrictions which talk about what you can or can't do. Some prohibit sheds or clotheslines or outbuildings. Those particular restrictions limit the lots in the Indigo Woods subdivision to single-family residence use. So the small strip of land, which is part of this application, is the only part of the foundation's property that could arguably be governed by those restrictions. Again, I don't think they apply to an excess parcel of land like this that is not a lot. But to avoid that from even being an issue for you, and so that we don't need to talk about it again, we're going to withdraw that strip of land from our application so that it now would be clear that there is no deed restrictions affecting the 6-acre parcel. So with that, I'd like to introduce a copy of the title insurance policy as an exhibit for the record, if I may.
Thanks.
The next point I wanted to make, if you recall, at the May 16th meeting, we needed to appear before ACA because of the way our special exception regulations read. Even though we're not proposing any new buildings that typically ACA would review. We did appear before ACA on June 11th. The minutes are public record, although I don't know that they have been approved yet. So I don't want to submit copies of those minutes because I don't know that they're officially approved. I attended that meeting on June 11th, and the proposed minutes indicate that Mr. Cunningham made a motion to endorse the project and the preservation of the buildings with the note that any changes to parking, lighting, landscaping might need a further review by ACA should that occur in the future. And the other two members, Mr. Provence and Mr. Williams, Matt Williams, concurred with that recommendation. So we have checked that box, and ACA did review our application. The final point is with respect to the rescheduling or continuing of tonight's hearing. And I know that Ms. Mannix read the legal notice and that the legal notice appeared in the July 11th edition of The Source. It appeared on the town's website. The notice appeared, I think, July 5th. And Attorney Pellegrino submitted a letter on July 8th indicating that there may be some procedural defect in the rescheduling or continuing of the hearing tonight to a special meeting. In that letter, and I presume that all the commissioners read that, what is absent from the letter is the fact that on June 20th, when you continued this hearing with the agreement and extension from the applicant, it had indicated that the hearing would not be heard this evening, meaning June 20th, and it is continued to July 18th or an earlier special meeting date and location that will be adequately posted by the commission. So the suggestion that everybody thought it was July 18th is just not accurate, number one. Attorney Pellegrino's letter doesn't include the information, which is the exact quote that I just read. The notice, as I understand it, was town council was consulted to make sure that adequate notice was given, and that is publishing on the town website. And it also is publishing in The Source, albeit on July 11th, which was last Thursday. We took, as the applicant, took the additional step of mailing the continuation and the legal notice of tonight's proceedings to all of the folks within 500 feet, and that certificate of mailing is of record. So I just want to, for the record, state that our position is that this special meeting is in fact legally convened and notice was and is adequate. I would note that in the same July 11th source, there was some paid advertising supporting the denial of our application, which in and of itself identifies the fact that the hearing is supposed to be on July 18th, but it does say in parentheses to verify. So whoever was responsible for that ad obviously knew that July 18th wasn't exactly the date that it was going to be continued to, and that it was subject to an earlier special meeting. So with that, I would like to turn the presentation over to Mike Ott, our civil engineer, so he can walk through the site plan system.
Hey, Mike.
Yep, okay. Good evening. Just for the record, I know Attorney McCann said this, but just for the record again, I am Michael Ott. I am a licensed professional engineer and licensed land surveyor. And my office is here in Madison at 60 Wall Street. I will give the commission a little context. My plan for the presentation will be very brief. Please stop me if you have any questions as I go. I plan to show the commission the site, give some context for the site using the town's geographic information system, and then show the commission the site plan that we prepared for the site and the subsurface sewage disposal system that we've also prepared. So may I share my screen?
That up to be Aaron or?
No, he can.
Yes,
Permission.
okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So can the commission and the audience see my screen now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So just for zooming out for context, and I'm quite sure that everyone in the room is familiar with this, of course, but this is the site that I've just highlighted in yellow. This is Opening Hill Road that runs, if you can see my cursor moving northeast, southwest. This is the Neck River, the blue line that you see that runs through Gould's Pond and the dam, and then continues southeasterly beyond the site. Where you see lots laid out in orange, they are within the town of Madison. On the opposite side of the river is, of course, the town of Guilford, as everyone knows, and because we're using Madison's geographic information system, there's no lot line shown in the Guilford portion. I'll kind of try to trace the bounds of it, but what I'm tracing is the Indigo Woods subdivision. And it was, as you probably all know, it used to be owned by the Tremaine estate. It was some 70 acres or so, as I recall, was cut off and subdivided quite some time ago. I actually worked on it, but it was a very long time ago. I don't remember the exact dates, but the subdivision was actually created as part of the Tremaine estate, and the subdivision created Kachina Way and Indigo Trail. And the remaining land is the two parcels that are the subject of the application, although as Attorney McCann just explained, he has now withdrew the small strip of land along Indigo Trail. So the parcel that we're discussing tonight is really what I've highlighted in yellow, which is the 6-acre parcel. I'm gonna stop sharing and then reshare very quickly because I'm not sure if I can change screens and whether you will see it. So I'll stop sharing just for a sec. And I will bring up the site plan and then reshare if I can. So this is the site plan that we prepared. The commission should have, so I believe. Indigo Trail on the left side running to the east and west, and Opening Hill Road on the bottom of the page across the front of the parcel. Gould's Pond is approximately, and the dam is approximately here, if you can see my cursor moving. And this is the bridge that carries Opening Hill Road over the Neck River. So the total parcel area is 6 acres. A very small portion, and I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. A very small portion is actually located in Guilford. So this side of the Neck River is actually located in the town of Guilford. It's a little over 6,000 square feet, about 6,250 approximately square feet. The remainder of the parcel, of course, is located in the town of Madison. There is an inland wetland. This line with the dark triangles on it is the inland wetland boundary. The boundary was delineated by a professional wetland scientist from New England Environmental Services some time ago. We located it. We prepared this topographic survey as the underlying base mapping for the site, and we located the inland wetland boundary as delineated by the wetland scientist. The site is partially wooded and partially a very nice open maintained lawn in the rear of the site. The site is located, and I think others will talk about this, but the site is located in a single family rural residence RU1 zoning district. The little portion in Guilford is also located in Guilford's single family residential zoning district. There are, as I'm sure as everyone knows, there is a loop driveway that currently serves the site from Opening Hill Road. There's also a narrow, maybe 8 feet or so wide gravel driveway that runs along this side of the house parallel to Indigo Trail for a bit. Runs along the barn, I should say, and parallels Indigo Trail for a bit, and then bears to the right a little bit and provides access to the rear of the property. There's a chain link fence across this portion of the front of the property, and there's a gate in that fence at that driveway. The site is, in addition to being located in a single family rural residence zoning district, it's also located partially within a special flood hazard area zone. The flooding source, of course, is the Neck River. The boundary of that special flood hazard area zone is this dark dashed line, which I'll try to trace, and hopefully everyone can see my cursor moving. So it runs through the site along this boundary. A portion of both structures, the main house and the barn and guest house, are located within that special flood hazard area zone. Utilities are provided to the site. Power, electrical power, telephone, and cable television is provided to the site from the utility pole line on the site side of Opening Hill Road, and overhead wires and cables to the building. There's a utility pole actually located on the site also. Sewage disposal is on-site sewage disposal systems, subsurface sewage disposal systems on the site. And there is a water supply well on the site, which I will talk about in a minute, also, that provides potable water. There are very limited records in the town's files on the sewage disposal systems and the water supply well. We hired a contractor to investigate and find the location of the water supply well on the site, and it is within this portion of the building. This is an addition to the historic portion of the home, and the well is actually located beneath the floor within that addition portion to the building. And that, the best we can tell at this point, that water, based on the contractor's investigation, that water supply well provides potable water to both the main house as well as to the barn and the guest house. We do not believe that there is a second potable water or drinking water well on the site. Based on our investigation, there could be, but again, there are no records, and based on our investigation, we could not find one. There is an old discontinued well that appears to have been used for an irrigation system, not for potable water, for drinking water. and that is proposed to be properly abandoned in accordance with the state's regulations for the abandonment of wells. So that's an overview of the existing site. This site questions at this point.
I'm losing you. We can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I asked if there were any questions.
The public will have to wait until after the presentation. I think we'd probably like to wait until the presentation is complete and then ask questions from the commissioners and then ask of the audience, open it to the audience.
Okay. So this plan also outlines the proposed improvements. I described the existing site and its conditions, and now I'll describe the proposed improvements. And they are very simple. There is regarding parking. There are today, there's room in front of the very nice stone masonry wall on the site. There is room for 4 parking spaces. There's no modifications that need to be made to have those 4 parking spaces at that location. There is also room here in this location for another 5 parking spaces. The only modification that we would like to propose is to resurface this planting bed area to give a little bit more room for vehicles to back out of these left-hand parking spaces. And there are also 3 existing parking spaces within the garage. There's a 3-bay garage within this building. And then I will zoom out again a little bit if I can. So in addition to that parking, we are proposing a temporary parking area that would only be used periodically here at the rear of the site. It is been sized to accommodate 12 vehicles. It would be accessed by an improved driveway. We would widen and regrade the existing driveway to a width of 12 feet. The driveway would be surfaced in gravel, so will the parking area. There will be a bituminous concrete apron, as there typically is at most gravel driveways out at the street within the right of way of Opening Hill Road. I'm sorry. Bear with me 1 second. I didn't mean to do that. The parking area is located, and I don't know if the commission can really see this, but it's perfectly purposefully located in a low area so that it would not be visible from Indigo Trail. The topography, as you can see, all these dashed lines indicate a 1-foot change in elevation, and the slope is rising from the parking area. It's rising up to Indigo Trail some 10 feet or so. So this proposed parking area is set down in a low area and would not be visible from Indigo Trail. So those are the proposed improvements to the site. I should also mention that Dave Sullivan, our traffic engineer from SLR, will talk about this a little bit later, but in order to provide for adequate site distance from this improved driveway, we are calling for the removal of vegetation that is along Opening Hill Road in this section between the existing driveway, the existing loop driveway, and the new improved driveway opening. So I will stop sharing again and switch one more time to the plan for the subsurface sewage disposal system. So this is the same base mapping, same plan of the existing conditions of the site, but this is a 3-sheet set of drawings that depicts a proposed subsurface sewage disposal system that's been designed to serve both the main building as well as the outbuilding, the guest building. It's been designed to meet the requirements of the technical standards of the Connecticut Public Health Code, and it has been submitted to the town's health department for their review. It will be in the lawn area below ground, of course. We purposefully sited it to be outside of the canopy of these two large maples, so that we don't interfere with their roots. So the entire subsurface sewage system, of course, would be below grade and will not be able to be seen, other than access points for the septic tank and pump chamber structures that will be required as part of the system. So I think that sums up my presentation. I will stop sharing and turn it back over to Attorney McCann to introduce the next speaker.
Mr. Rudd.
Yeah, our next speaker, as I indicated, was going to be Nina Peak. She's a certified planner with SLR International Corporation. I see her on the screen. She may be having some weather where she is, as I just learned, but hopefully she can get through her presentation and her report.
Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're having some weather blowing through, so I'll try to get through this as quickly and comprehensively as possible. My name is Nina Peak, as Chris said. I'm a certified planner with 30 years of municipal and private land development planning experience, and I'm currently the U.S. Manager of Planning at SLR International Consulting based out of Cheshire and New Haven, Connecticut. SLR was hired by the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation to evaluate the compliance of the proposal to renovate 6 Opening Hill Road for use as an educational and philanthropic center. We have submitted a memo to the Planning and Zoning Commission, which evaluates the compliance of the proposal with the 2013, 2024 to 34 POCDs, the zoning, and the Town of Madison's comprehensive plan. There's a significant amount of detail in that memorandum. I've put together a brief slide presentation for this evening summarizing the content of that. And if, Erin, if it's okay, may I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
And
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So, as Chris mentioned, the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation is seeking a special exception permit to use the facility for educational and philanthropic purposes. We have reviewed the materials listed on this slide for consistency and provided a memo to the P&Z, which you have. I'm just going to run through quickly each of our findings, summarizing at the end with conclusions, and then some recommendations for the P&Z to consider when imposing additional conditions. So the first thing we did was we looked at zoning compliance and the use. So the proposed use, as you know, is not permitted as of right in the RU1 zoning district. So as a result, the applicant is seeking a special exception permit for a philanthropic, educational, recreational, religious use. As you all know, the code does not currently define that use, the philanthropic use, and so the code sends us to seek a definition commonly attributed to that use. We looked at several sources. We looked at, the OG Merriam-Webster for a non-for-profit. We looked at several zoning codes, the town of New Canaan, the town of Guilford. We sought consult from the complete book of illustrated book of development definitions, which is a very commonly cited source. And we also referred to the IRS's definition of a 501c3 charitable religious institution. Based on this analysis, we determined that it is consistent with the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation's mission to seek and fund innovative projects. The foundation is a 501c3 organization, a non-for-profit. The foundation proposes to use the site and all funds generated by any activities on the site for philanthropic and educational uses to support its mission. Even the revenue generating activities on the site would not generate a profit. And as a result, we concluded that the proposed project would be considered and reasonably defined as a philanthropic and educational use, and therefore, as it is listed specifically as a special exception use, it should be considered by the P&Z as special exception use in the RU1 zoning district. So now that we sort of evaluated that the use is considered and has been considered as a special exception use in the RU1, we went on to take a look at dimensional regulations. With the exception of the minimum front yard where there are existing structures, the proposed project, as Mike and Chris have mentioned, does not propose any new buildings on the site or any additional development, and as such is compliant with the dimensional regulations presented in section 5.5 of the Town of Madison zoning regulations. As noted here, the main house and the guest house do encroach on the existing front yard, but no change is proposed, and therefore it should be considered a pre-existing non-conforming use. Next, we took a look at the signage. So the signage regulations is defined in 10.4 of the Madison zoning regulations, limit the sign, the proposed sign to 2 square feet. In all other areas, the sign complies. The proposed sign is 6 feet. We have made a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission that they require the applicant to reduce the sign of the size of the sign so that it complies with the 2 square foot regulation. Next, parking regulations. As Mike mentioned, there are 12 existing parking spaces. That is compliant with the regulations. There is one provision in the code which prohibits parking in the front yard. Again, that's a pre-existing non-conforming use. There are parking spaces located in the front yard. But as Mike mentioned, there is no proposed change to those parking spaces, and therefore it should be considered a pre-existing non-conforming use. So then we moved on to our review of the 2013 Plan of Conservation and Development. So there's a lot of material, a lot of words on these slides. There's a lot of additional analyses in the memo that was submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission, but I'll try to just do a quick summary of our review of that document. In the 2013 POCD, there is a consistency checklist in Chapter 8 that requires the P&Zs to take a look at any application or initiative that is presented to them and compare it to these criteria that are listed in the POCD. Here are a few of the consistency or evaluation criteria. The POCD asks that applications protect scenic resources, protect historic and archaeological resources, minimize character detractions, retain undeveloped land, encourage economic development, and conserve energy and water. There are other items in there which aren't particularly relevant to this, but again, encourage everyone to take a look at that checklist and compare it to the proposal. Which does propose to restore the existing structures on the site as well as the scenic landscape. As Mike mentioned, it's a 6-acre property. The majority of the property will remain open and undeveloped. One of the key components of the 2013 POCD is the protection of historic and archaeological resources. The applicant has been in contact with the Connecticut Historic Preservation Office that determined the property would be eligible for listing for a number of reasons. And as a result, the applicant is submitting a National Historic Designation nomination, which would preserve and protect the property long-term. As many of you probably know, the site was in serious disrepair on or, as of 2019. Subsequently, it was foreclosed and the Bank of America took over, did some cleanup of the site, some functional improvements. This proposal would restore and adaptively reuse the site and restore the original historic landscape. Again, the majority of the property would remain undeveloped. Economic development, primary and secondary economic benefits to the town include employment at the facility, but also revenue generated from visitors to the site, hotels, restaurants, etc. The applicant does propose sustainability measures. We recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission require the applicant to develop those a little bit more and provide the Planning and Zoning Commission with a list of what those measures would be. Moving on to the current draft 2024-2034 POCD, which is currently in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Again, there are a number of goals, objectives, and policies. We've pulled out the two most relevant to this project, again, referencing the historic and cultural landmark preservation. And notable here is integrating those sites into daily life. Not only is the foundation proposing to restore this, but also bring the property back into an active use, which is always the preference of the Historic Preservation Office, both state and national, not to just mothball facilities, but to bring them back into active reuse and generating interest to both the site and the area. And again, preservation of natural, public, and private resources. The applicant not only is preserving the majority of the site, but also is proposing sustainability measures in terms of their water, sewer, etc. Again, we recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission get a little bit more detail on those measures, those suggested measures. Finally, the applicant, the requirement of the special exception use permit requires an evaluation of the application against the comprehensive plan. As previously noted, the proposed use is allowed. It's listed as a special exception use in the RU1 zoning district. Per 5.1, the Planning and Zoning Commission must consider the project on an individual basis, weighing the impact of the use upon the surrounding area. As mentioned by Chris, and with the supplementary materials provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission, there's been a traffic analysis. There's this planning analysis. You'll hear from Mark Nadeau, who's done a property valuation assessment. And so providing these additional supplementary materials should hopefully help the Planning and Zoning Commission in their deliberations. And of course, the Planning and Zoning Commission may consider additional conditions. In conclusion, just summarizing what we've talked about and what's presented in our memo, the proposed project is a philanthropic and educational use. Their mission is consistent with the widely acceptable definition of that use, and therefore is currently codified as a special exception use in this zoning district. The majority of the uses proposed on the site are consistent with and ancillary to of a philanthropic use and should therefore be allowed. The proposed use for experienced guests is permitted as of right in the town of Madison zoning regulations with a limit of 2 persons. Accordingly, our suggestion is the P&Z should limit that component of the project to no more than 2 persons at any time. The structures on the project site were constructed before the adoption of building standard. Therefore, there are several that can be considered pre-existing non-conforming structures, but there are no changes proposed to those structures. The project proposes a 6-foot square sign, which exceeds the maximum allowable. As a result, the P&Z should limit the proposed sign to 2-foot square. The existing on-site parking complies with the off-street parking regulations. There are no changes proposed with the exception of resurfacing the gravel driveway as mentioned by Mike. The material therefore is consistent with the zoning requirement for an adequate all-weather surface. The proposed project was evaluated for consistency with both the 2013 and the subsequent P-O-C-D, and is substantially compliant with the regulations and the checklist. And finally, the proposed project is consistent with the Town of Madison Comprehensive Plan. Our recommendations, just to summarize, reduce the proposed on-site signage from 6 foot square to 2 foot square, require the kitchen facilities to be residential scale, consistent with a single-family home, limit experienced guests to a maximum of 2 persons at all times, require the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation staff to reside on site when there's anyone else living there, just to maintain consistency and oversight of the operations of the site and any conditions imposed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Dave Sullivan, who's going to speak right after me, will talk a little bit more about the parking management, but our recommendation is temporary or permanent no parking signs on Opening Hill Road and Indigo Way in advance of any activity on the site where off-site parking is proposed. The applicant should be required to identify that location and let the Madison Police and Fire Departments know, and potentially coordinate all events with Madison Police and Fire Departments already required. P&Z may want to consider having police on site when the applicant is hosting larger events. And finally, provide additional detail regarding energy conservation and sustainability measures so the P&Z can have some comfort that those additional measures will meet the environmental considerations that are prioritized in many of the town's existing policy documents. So with that, I will stop my screen share. I know that was a lot of information to take in, and look forward to hearing everyone's questions following the presentation by Dave.
Thank you.
I just wanted to note for the record that the recommendations of Nina in the compliance report all are agreeable to the applicant, and the applicant would welcome them as conditions to any approval to the application. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dave Sullivan.
Thank you and good evening. Again, my name is David Sullivan. I manage the Traffic Transportation Mobility Group, SLR. I hang my hat in our New Haven office. I've been doing this for longer than I care to admit, but I'll leave it at over 30 years. I'm a professional engineer and have been doing transportation planning and traffic engineering for all of that time. Normally I would give a brief summary of the type of things we looked at and what the findings were, but I think I'll go into a little bit more of the report, a little bit more of the detail, so you can get a feel for what our analysis entailed and what kind of findings we had. And when we found things that we thought required mitigation, we have made those recommendations. So with no further ado, the scope of our study had several tasks. We did field reconnaissance. We did data collection, where we collected traffic volume data from that CONDOT had, Connecticut Department of Transportation. We looked at crash data, 5 years, which is the typical window that we look at. That information is from the Connecticut crash data repository. We did significant check of the access and the sight lines. We made a detailed review of the programming and estimated the traffic. Did supplemental counts to update what CONDOT had already done. And we conducted an impact analysis. And at the end of the report, we have several recommendations that we have made. So I'll start with the existing roadway conditions. And for tonight, I'll call Opening Hill Road a north-south road. It's slightly northeast to southwest, but for ease, I'll call it a north-south road. The speed limit on Opening Hill Road is 25 miles an hour. The area is primarily residential. The road is classified as a major collector by PennDOT. A major collector means that it takes traffic from local roads or to some specific destination, such as the school to the north. So that's what its classification is. Generally, a collector road would have a roadway width somewhere between 20 and 24 feet. The amount of traffic that a collector road generally handles is between 500 and 2,500, although some major collector roads do carry as much as 6,000 vehicles a day. The Opening Hill Road specifically, for the most part, is between 20 and 22 feet wide. The narrowest section where we had some sub 20-foot dimensions that we identified were in Guilford. There were 3 in particular. We called the town engineer of Guilford, and I walked the road with her, and we looked at those 3 locations. 2 of them were where there's very large trees, and one of them was a rock outcropping. None of them were on curves. She was not particularly concerned with them. The accident or crash data would back that up. And what she agreed to do is talk to the tree warden and see what the health of the trees were. They looked not 100% healthy, but if the tree warden thought that they were due to come down, she would let us know, and the applicant has agreed to do that if that is determined to be warranted. So, and again, the road itself, and I'll editorialize a little bit, is not unusual, particularly for Madison roads or many New England roads, in its character, in its width, in its geometry, and in its function. And that's what we found in particular. Some of the specific traffic characteristics of the road, I mentioned that we collected information from PennDOT, and what they found was that the annualized daily traffic, what they do is take a number and say, on average, this is how much traffic is on this road. Their estimate was 950 vehicles. Again, the typical range is between 500 and 2,500. To give you an idea of a higher level, Clapper Hill Road in Guilford has an ADT of 2,800. So it gives you some idea that we're well below half of what that is considered. And that road has a similar function as this one. To supplement that information, we did our own counts. We did a full week of traffic counts for a number of reasons. One, to update, validate the PennDOT information. We did it for 7 days, so we would get a feel for variations, not only in traffic, but in speeds, for example. We looked at what these machines do for us. Not only give us traffic volumes, they give us the type of vehicles that are going past it. And we found that 9% of the traffic is trucks or buses, which, to give you some perspective, that's I won't say a substantial number, but it's a notable number. So there is those types of vehicles on this road today. It also allows us to get travel speeds. Almost always the speed of traffic is higher than the posted speed. Doesn't come as a surprise to anyone. What we use when we're determining certain characteristics is what we call the 85th percentile speed. That's the speed at which 85% of the traffic is traveling at or below. So the 15% of Yahoos we're not designing for, we're designing for the 85th percentile. In this particular case, the speed for 85th percentile speed for northbound vehicles was 39.4 miles per hour. And again, we got an 85th percentile speed for each of the days. So this was the highest speed on the of the 7 days individual. Southbound was 37.3 miles per hour for 85th percentile. I'll talk more about those as I go along. Actually, I'll talk more about them now. Intersection site distances. So this is the, we need to understand if people can exit this site safely. And to do that, we measure what the intersection site distances are. So based on those speeds, those 85th percentile speeds, CONDOT provides us in ultimately AASHTO, which is a federal document, which CONDOT is based on, takes the speed and turns that into the amount of feet that somebody should be able to see somebody approaching from. So if you're sitting in your car and somebody is traveling 39.4 miles per hour, you should be able to see that car 435 feet away to be able to safely identify it, make your decision, get into the traffic stream without the vehicle having to make any maneuvers such as a slow down or stop. In the southbound direction for 37.3, you would need 415 feet. So slightly slower, you need slightly less distance. So we looked at initially at the 2 driveways. As you know, Mike pointed out, it's a semicircle. There's 2 driveways on either end of the parking. We first looked at the northern driveway, and what we found was that you could get the site distance looking to your left or coming out of Guilford. You can get the required distance there. There might be some minor shrub clearing or things of that nature, but nothing dramatic. Looking to the north, however, there's a stand of fairly mature shrubs. Our recommendation is that those shrubs need to be removed or as very minimum relocated out of the sightline. With those things done, the sight lines for exiting vehicles at the northern driveway meet the standards and requirements. At the southern driveway, the sightline restriction is not so easy because it's essentially the curvature of the road. So in that particular case, our first recommendation on the act, or our second recommendation beside the clearing, is that this driveway function as an inbound from the southern driveway and outbound on the northern driveway. And we checked what we call stopping sight distance to make sure that somebody that was slowing down to enter into the driveway, that vehicles behind them would see them make the maneuver, and we wouldn't be causing rear end accidents. It's called stopping sight distance, and we meet that criteria. The gravel driveway, which is slightly north of the 2 established driveways, as Mike pointed out, that will be improved. And by improved, it'll be a standard width. However, most importantly, I asked Mike to ensure that if there was a car waiting to exit the gravel driveway, that there was enough room and enough width at the throat of that driveway so that entering vehicles would not be affected. So that vehicles could enter, even though the traffic here is not going to be a consistent thing. We want to make sure that we're accounting for the possibility that someone exits while someone's trying to enter. So if we only left the let's say 15-foot width through the entire length, then if somebody was going to exit, that entering car would have to wait and would be waiting out on Opening Hill Road to make the entering maneuver. So we've the design is accounted for that. Talk more about the use of that in a moment. But we also check the sight lines from the gravel driveway, and looking right is no problem. Looking left will be no problem once the recommendation that I put forth for the northern driveway looking right is implemented. That will be the same mitigation required to improve the sight line looking left from the gravel driveway. Roadway crash data. Okay, so when we initially did our study, there were 4 crashes that were identified in the 5-year period. All of the crashes were, we looked, we looked from Nortontown Road to Blingett Road. All of the accidents we identified were north of the site. There were 4 of them. 3 of the 4 were property damage only, suspected injury in one of the crashes. They were all single vehicle and had some contributing circumstances. We crashed 1. It was deemed excessive speeds. Crash 2, there were rainy weather conditions and excessive speeds. Crash 3, the driver was experiencing fatigue or fell asleep. That particular person refused an alcohol test. That was noted in the report. And crash 4 was with icy, snowy road conditions. So those were the 4 that were identified at the time. Since then, as we all know, there's been a 5th accident, which has recently happened, and which caused us to look harder at the bridge which exists out there. When our first look at it, the width of it is up 21 feet for the travelway. There hadn't been any history of crashes there, so our focus did not immediately go there. Not sure of all the details of the crash, whether I know there was, in reading the report, apparently there was a tire issue and hit the abutment, and so I'm not quite sure exactly what happened, but nonetheless, we think there are some things that can be done out there. So, for example, there is guide rail when you're coming from Madison towards Guilford. Unfortunately, that guide rail is not used as a protecting feature for the abutment. If you notice, the end of it near the abutment is outbound from the actual abutment. So it's there to protect people from going over the edge as you approach it into the ravine in the Neck River. So one of our recommendations is to replace that guide rail and have it properly mounted so that it is actually giving direction and protection from the blunt end of the abutment. In the other direction, no guide rail. So we're recommending the same thing be done in the northbound direction coming from Guilford. So a guide rail would be provided there. In addition to the guide rail, we think there should be some signage that could be added. Very little signage out there in this regard. And additionally, some reflectors. There are some reflectors that can go right on top of the abutment. Some could be on the blunt ends. Some of those things can be done. And we've discussed this with the applicant. They're willing to make these improvements to improve the safety of that crossing. So let's get on to the operations, the traffic operations. I'm sure you've heard in the past, there's really three types of events. There's the meetings, there's the gatherings, and there's the events. So what's actually happening here from a traffic standpoint and how we made our analysis? Well, the first thing is that there's 4 staff members that typically will be there, maybe once per week, maybe twice per week. We said, well, let's assume 4 staff members, 2 are there every day, and they arrive during the morning peak hour, and they leave during the afternoon peak hour, and they have their own individual cars. There's also the 6 bedrooms, which would allow for 8 people to be staying on site, living, working on site, various capacities. So what we assume for that is that half of those people would again be arriving, that they're all taking their own cars, and they're arriving or leaving during peak hour. Realistically, the way I understand this, these folks may be coming and staying there for a certain period of time. They're not punching a time clock where they're likely to be making these traffic movements during peak hours, but nonetheless, we assume that they work. And then we have the meetings, gatherings, and events. So we have the base situation of traffic, and then we have the meetings, gathering, and events. So let's talk about the parking for these first of all. The biggest parking concern, or I guess I would call it concern, but the biggest parking issue that we identified is for the meetings, believe it or not, because that will generate individual vehicles, and these meetings could be held for up to 12 people. So now you have some of the parking that may be being used by the residents or by the staff, and then you have the potential on these meetings, which we would suggest be parked on site. So I think these meetings have to be carefully orchestrated and managed. So if it's one of the larger meetings and you expect that there's going to be 7 people arriving for it, and you have 5 parking spaces that are not being used at the moment, that's when the gravel lot would come into play. So you would instruct some of those folks prior to the meeting ever happening to be moved to the gravel area so that the convenient parking for those day people is available. So that's the plan for the meetings. And we have up to 12 because, being a conservative traffic engineer by nature, I said, what if there were 12 spaces filled up with 8 residents and 4 employees, which makes 12, and we had 12 people driving individual. I said, give me 12 spaces in this gravel lot so that if we had to take everybody out of the front, we could. Unrealistic, but the belt and suspenders are put in place for that eventuality. The other thing that gravel lot could be used for is for not only the meetings, but because the meetings may have maybe a lot of sandwiches or something like that. But the service of those things, maybe kitchen staff, we assume 2 may come, but they would have the ability to do the loading and unloading. And in the bigger events, perhaps there's an area where there's more service needed, but that gravel area could be used for service vehicles too, so that they don't need to use the front parking area. So that's the parking. The meetings we talked about. And when you add up all these things for the meeting, we have the staff, the potential catering and kitchen staff, which would be meeting specific, the attendees all driving themselves, and the residences, as I said, half of them leaving or departing. In the morning peak hour, there would be a total of 22 trips in and out under this meeting scenario, as well as in the afternoon, 22 trips. The difference is most of the trips would be inbound in the morning and most of the trips outbound in the afternoon. So that's the magnitude of traffic with all these conservative assumptions we put in place. When we get to the gatherings, we have operationally they would be same, except the limit is now 25 people. So right off the bat, it goes from a meeting to a gathering because it's over 12. So everything we put in place for 12, we now have to rethink. So the gatherings will be serviced with a shuttle. So attendees will be instructed for a meeting place and a gathering place, no pun intended, and they will be shuttled in. The parking impact is less because nobody's parked there. The shuttle will come and go. It won't stage there. And when you add all that up, instead of 22 trips, you're replacing the attendees for the meetings with the shuttle trips. You would have 16 trips. And it would be a little bit more balanced because the shuttle would go in and out. So you would still have more inbound than outbound, but it would be a little bit more balanced. So that number is 16. The events, which are the bigger things that can have up to 150 attendees, clearly that is going to be a shuttle operation again. You need more shuttles. The shuttles that we discussed would have a minimum of capacity of 20 or 25 people. And by using that, we estimated that the 150 attendees, if there were a maximum of 150 at 15 people per shuttle, would be 10 shuttles. 10 shuttles to get them in, 10 shuttles to get them out. And that would result in 33 trips in the morning and afternoon. Again, more entering than exiting, but again, more balanced than in the meetings. And again, that happens twice a year. So we get potential for 10 more trips. And I've already indicated that the road has the history of accepting vehicles of that size over the years. So the next step was to say, well, what is the traffic impact? Now, the way we determine traffic impact is to create a scenario at some date in the future, this year, this time. For this study, we picked next year, 2025. And we said, what will the traffic be without any of the activity coming to fruition? And what would it be if it does come to fruition? And which means those estimates I added to the driveways for that scenario to see what the operating conditions would be. The results of impact analyses are in terms of letter grades, A through F, like school grades. Level service A, for example, means that you pull up to the end of the driveway, the stop sign, the stop condition, and you are on the road and on your way in less than 10 seconds. As your delay increases to 20, 30, 40, 50 seconds, the levels of service get worse and worse and worse. And ultimately, service F, cheat sheet here. Level of service F, which is the worst, is if you're waiting over 50 seconds. So we did this analysis, and we looked at driveways under the three scenarios, the meetings, for the gatherings, and for the events. And during those peak hours, the morning peak hour, afternoon peak hour, and even if these were to take place on Saturday, since we had the Saturday data, we looked at it, and in every case, the level of service would be level of service A. So you can't get better than A, so consequently, the traffic impact is undefinable in that particular round. So we've done a detailed evaluation of safety. We've done a detailed evaluation of the operations, and we came up with a series of recommendations, which I'll go through now, some which I mentioned, and some which I may not. One, due to the sightline restrictions, the north driveway should be exit only, and the south driveway should be enter only. Any brush or branches within the right of way should be trimmed and maintained as such to prevent obstruction of the sightlines. Two, programming should be scheduled such that meeting, gathering, and events do not overlap each other. Additionally, meetings that occur on the same day should be scheduled at least an hour apart to prevent overlap in traffic entering and exiting the site and overlap in on-site parking. So we want to have that window between the events, so we're back to status quo before the next one starts. Three, parking for gathering and events should be staged off-sites and participants should be shown. Parking for larger meetings may require that residents or staff be located in the auxiliary gravel lot to free up space in the main paved parking area. Opening Hill Road has areas where the width, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opening Hill Road has areas where the width of the road is less than the guidelines for a collector road. These segments, all in Guilford, have not been problematic over the years in terms of crashes. However, we have met with the Guilford Town Engineer to review these areas. There are 2 areas that restrict the width that are not considered problematic. However, the Guilford Tree Warden will be contacted by the town engineer, and if deemed appropriate, these trees will be removed. The applicant is willing to pay for the tree removal as requested. A recent crash at the bridge over the Neck River brought to light the opportunity to improve the safety of that bridge. While the width is consistent with much of the road, the abutments pose a lateral obstruction that could be better protected. In particular, guide rails, advanced warning signage, and reflectors are proposed. And once again, the applicant has agreed to implement these recommendations. Pass the mic back to Chris, and we have to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Next, I'm going to introduce Mark Nadu, who has done a property value impact analysis, a copy of which is on file. Here's Mark. And I'm reading nice people. Copy of this document.
Start in the middle and you pass it to.
We're good.
We're good. What? Huh? Right back.
Anyone needs to stand up and stretch. Recess. Get some water. Oh, Mark, present.
Guess I'm gonna wait. It's working? Pretty good. Any better? Yeah. I should know this on the band. You have to hold the microphone close to you. We're gonna wait for, I guess, Mr. Rubin to come back.
Or we may want to get. just-
I'm sorry?
We may want to keep going.
Okay, I will. We'll be back, right? Hopefully we'll be back, right? Yeah. My name is Mark Nato. I am a licensed and certified real estate appraiser. Also, I've been in the development business and I do building consulting. I've been doing all of these things for 40 years. Mostly in Connecticut, some in the state of Maine, some in other states in New England. I live, and my office is in Guilford, Connecticut. I've been working on the shoreline for the better part of 40 years. So I'm pretty familiar with the landscape. In fact, I'm familiar with this house because I knew, well, ever so slightly the prior occupant who I guess for a while she took great care of it and it kind of fell into tremendous disrepair. Anyway, I was contacted for the purpose of doing a study to determine whether there would be a diminution in value relative or in response to the proposed improvements, changes, and restoration and renovation at this property. That property being the property at 6 Open Hill Road in Madison. Part of my scope of work was to inspect the property. I measured the structures, I photographed the structures. The second half of what I've done is to, certainly in addition to reviewing the proposal by the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation, which includes the scope of the type of activities they plan on having there, somewhat the scope of work that they intend to do to the structures that are on the site to make them more functional. I can tell you right now, none of the structures are habitable. They're in pretty poor condition. There's a lot of rot. There are roof leaks that apparently have been perpetuating for some time. When I examined the structures, many of the ceilings inside what I would call the antique dwelling, which dates to the 18th century, a lot of the ceilings are removed in that structure. My guess is the product of leaks that probably occurred over a period of time. In response to the proposed renovations, changes, and organization that will tend to occupy the main structure and the other structures on the property, I looked at what would be considered the most similar kind of uses. Now, the foundation's use is largely that of educational. So I fanned out and I looked at 3 educational facilities, one of which is on Open Hill Road, the second of which is the Grove School location, and the third of which is Madison High School. The study that I did is very simplistic in that, and I'm going to show you. In that, so all the commission members have this. So on page 7, this is the country school. And basically on this map, there's a red dot in the middle. There is a 1 mile radius from that dot. And what it shows, this is a culmination of all the home sales within a 2-year period. And with no discrimination as to size, price, or anything, it's all the home sales. This was done for each of the 3 locations. And the idea about choosing this as a benchmark is that it helps isolate the kind of use, but in all instances, all of these uses are more intense than what the foundation is proposing to use at 6 Opening Hill Road. Now, so for example, and I'm going to keep this as concise as I can, the country school, which is located, I guess, about 1.5 miles north of the subject property. It's situated in about 40 acres. They have, by count, 215 day students. So in addition to classrooms, faculty, facilities, that kind of thing, they have athletic facilities, a baseball field, a running track, so on and so forth. And that's pretty much consistent with all of the educational facilities that I looked at in Madison. The one real exception would be that of the high school. It's just so much larger and accommodates so many more students. And I guess contiguous to the high school site is another school that was there before. That was the original high school. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
High school was built 10, 11 years ago, maybe? Or 12 years ago? Okay. I just remember it cost quite a bit. And then we built Guilford. And everyone was surprised. No, not at all. So addressing the country school, the 2 samplings I took were within 1 mile of the school, within 0.5 mile of the school. The median selling price of homes within 1 mile was $590,000. The median selling price within 0.5 mile, rounded, was $573,000. So not a material difference. The same thing was done for the Grove School. The Grove School sits on Tops Road, just south of Interstate 95. That site is nearly 90 acres, and it actually straddles Tops Road. There are school improvements on both sides of the road. And that student count reported to me was 146 total students. 116 are residential students and 30 are day students. So there are students that actually live on site at the Grove School. This facility as well has athletics facilities, a baseball field, tennis courts, a basketball court, field house, so on and so forth. They have 21 buildings with an aggregate area of approximately 72,000 square feet. They have 20,000 square feet of paid parking. The median sales price within 0.65 miles of this property was $520,500. The median sales price within 1/2 mile of this was $520,500, interestingly. There's no material difference there. The high school is very different. The high school also situated on a very large site. According to the town's data, has 1,160 high school students, multiple athletic facilities, a baseball field, a running track, multiple tennis courts, a basketball court, football facility, baseball field, and approximately 100,000 square feet of paid parking, all of which is lit with large stanchions that provide lighting to the parking area, the walking areas, and some of the athletic fields as well. The buildings in total have an aggregate area of 400,000 square feet. The median selling price of a home within 0.5 mile of Daniel Hand High School was $455,000. The median selling price of a home within 0.75 miles was approximately $509,000. So there you have a material difference, and I think logically, because the uses at the high school, the improvements are much greater, they're much more intense. Of the things that I would do as an appraiser to look at, to decide whether there's cause or some kind of contributory factor that would cause a diminution in value of the surrounding properties. First is noise. And based upon this proposed use, I don't see anything that's material in terms of noise, because all the activities are largely inside. I said are largely inside.
Let him talk, please.
Air pollution. There is no noted impact by way of air pollution. Light pollution. There's no plan for raised stanchions or lighting of the parking area other than ground lighting. So there's no material difference in the amount of lumens that will be passed on the site. Incongruous structures, probably of the biggest concern. Now, it's my understanding that the main house, which is an 18th century house, will be restored and repaired. And that structure is probably one of the most congruous structures on the shoreline, where we have a large population of antique homes. The same is true of the accessory structure that's on the site that is basically built in the vernacular style. It's nothing out of the ordinary, and it's typical of what you would see in the landscape along the shoreline of Connecticut. Finally, with respect to traffic, on a general daily basis, based upon the numbers I looked at, there's not a material difference. The exception would be when they have a large event. Exception would be a large event. And in reading the documentation, it says that those large events would be limited to 3 a year. I don't know when they would be. It just said 3 a year. What I can tell you then in summary is that the comparison to the 3 schools, all of which are educational, all of which have outdoor facilities, all of which have a greater percentage of lighting, generating a greater amount of lumens. 2 of the 3 schools did not have a material difference as it related to the immediate improvements relative to those schools. And then when you went out to say like a mile, there was not a material difference. The only material difference was in the data in and around the high school and beyond a 3/4 mile radius. So my finding is that there shouldn't be any diminution in value. And in fact, my experience, and I underline my experience by saying that for over 40 years, I've worked on, restored, I've worked with the National Trust, the Connecticut Preservation Trust, the New Haven Preservation Trust, and Newport. And generally, the restoration and the preservation of a structure like this could be more of an augmented thing than a diminishing thing. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much. Oh, wait. There is one other, I apologize. There is one other thing. There's one other thing. I gave the commission this document here. What this is, it shows all of the homes on Opening Hill Road. This is the town's assessment, interpretation of value. The first is within 0.75 miles of Opening Hill Road. And you can see, here's the array of values and the size of those respective sites that the town has assigned. Then we get to, we're within 1/4 mile of the country school. And interestingly, the town's interpretation, the valuation company's interpretation of the value of those lots are basically the same.
So that concludes our presentation in chief, if you will. We do have some rebuttal, and because of the way we kind of went out of order last meeting, but I would reserve all of our rebuttal and our summation to whenever that occurs, probably at another meeting. So at this point, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair, and we can move to The next phase, there's no way to hear from the public because we want to hear from the public as well. And we hear what we said at the first meeting, continue to say that to the extent that the public or this commission has conditions or limitations which will make our proposal better, we are listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next phase would be questions from commissioners for the applicants. Based on what we've heard tonight, anyone has questions, including
I do.
Mike Bugda, great, and including our Zoom commissioners. Mike, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I have a question for the main attorney.
If you'll excuse me.
Oh, we should use the microphone.
Yes, that's my question. Do we have any background or history?
You need to hold it, it is on, you need to hold it right up to your lips.
Do we have any background or history on that sliver of land with the purpose and reason of how it existed in the first place?
I don't, I have some guesses about why that land was maintained by the Tremaines. It is, as you can see, it's a strip adjacent to Indigo Trail. I don't, it could never be built on, given the size of the structure. But it could be that the owners wanted to maintain that parcel of land to build homes along Indigo Trail and incorporate lots into that subdivision. But that's just speculation on my part. I don't know the history of that strip of land.
Okay,
I also don't believe it was ever intended to be subject to restrictions that it can only be used for a single family residence, because you can't put a single family residence on that lot. But that's as much as I know.
okay. Another question I had was, I visited the locale on one occasion. There's a little stone, kind of a turnabout in the front where there's a high wall. That wall will stay, correct? And then to the left of that, there's a high hedgerow. Will most of that stay in place?
Yes,
So none of that will be taken down?
no,
Okay. As for lighting plan, are there any changes to the lighting that's currently in place that are planned to be added?
no,
None. Okay. So there's no new quantity of 600 lumen lights expected to be added to the property?
no. And I can say confidently that the applicant has no interest in creating light emanating from this site to anywhere else. The lighting originally installed was part of the historical and architectural significance of the landscape. And so I would say it's a preservation of the lighting and not any increase or augmentation of light.
Okay. I had two questions also for Mr. Nadeau. On your additional sheet for the assessments, some of them seem to be emboldened in a different color. Is that intentional or is that?
It is, because those are the ones at the top section. Those are the ones that are most similar in site size relative to the average site size in the lower part, which is closer to the.
I understand. I don't recall you mentioning that, but okay.
I didn't mention that, no.
Okay. And then the other question on page 4 of your assessment, I don't understand the last sentence of increased traffic. It says events shall be limited to not more than.
Can you speak into the mic? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. It says here that events shall be limited to not more than one event per month and not more than 3 events per month.
Per year.
Oh, per year. Thank you. I see it now. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm done.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, Caroline,
Good.
can you explain that the experienced guests are the guests who will be not the program guests, the paying guests?
They could potentially be paying, yes. They would be people who would want to spend a long weekend immersed in the art and architectural history of the site. I have likened that to the farm stay on other occasions, which is farms can be allowed to have people immerse themselves for a weekend in the farm experience. So yes, and the recommendation from the certified planner was that we limit that to two, no more than two at a time, which we've agreed to implement that.
It would not include the program, yes.
Right, so the program guests would be more of artists or architects or designers in residence. The other type of residency would be staff.
Jeff, thanks.
So in total, how many residents do you expect to have? I mean, I've heard, up to 8, I think, is what you said. Is that the total? And then is that broken down by when you have the people that experience come?
I don't know that's officially broken down, but I think over the course of what we presented, we're saying that we would limit the residences to 2 experienced guests at a time.
Okay.
I strongly doubt that there will be 2 experienced guests in this site 365 days a year. It's just not going to happen. As far as staff residing there, that is probably the most likely candidate to have residents living full-time 365. And then as far as program guests, I would think that those are the ones I believe are typically 4 months, such as artist and residency, and they are selected through a criteria for whether they're eligible to effectively be gifted or granted the opportunity to live, work, and study, continue their profession in this location. So I can't give you an exact number. I know that we can not exceed 8 at a time. I know that we won't have more than 2 experienced guests at a time. And we won't have more than 2 staff people at a time.
And that would be the 365, potentially the 2 staff.
That's the only one I think that could get to that level.
Okay.
And we said we will always have staff in residency when there are other people in residency, so that there's that level of staff contact present.
Right.
All right, I have a question. I think we're just gonna go right down the line if that's okay. Is there any way you could control or prevent people from going north on Opening Hill? I don't know. I think that's a programming question. I'm not sure if it's not so much a logistical question, but in terms of the use of the property.
There's two things you could do. One is you could prohibit it with signage and hope for the best. What is more practical is that you instruct the folks when they're coming. For instance, you'll be giving guests directions. And when we did a look at, coming from 95, for example, coming from the hotel, for example, the train, we looked at those, and they're going to come through Hilton. That's the most direct way. They could be directed that way more specifically as part of the program. There's going to be a high degree of management that's going to be required here. All of their events are going to have to go through the fire department, the police department. So that could just be another checkbox that they get instructed that way. Now, if you're an employee and you live north on Opening Hill Road, it's kind of hard to make them have to circle all the way around to go to work, for example. But certainly for the vast majority of the traffic, I think you can find a way to do that.
Thank you.
And the staff could use the ancillary parking though, so it's a different entry into the property.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Bob Reinhardt. I'm gonna reserve some of my questions for the end when we have a chance to look at everything that was submitted, so. I just have a couple of questions to help me clarify a few thoughts. You may not be able to answer them all now, but I'll give you a head start on it. So the first one is, as I'm going through all the different submissions, trying to get my arms around the nature of each of the events, so the meetings, the gatherings, the events. It's very superficial as far as the description goes. I can't figure out what it actually is going to be. It's 150 people with a live band. Don't answer. I'm just saying, I don't know. So I can't figure out the impact on the neighborhood until I actually understand what the intent is, because there's a lot. So. I don't know if I'm gonna do it too. Okay, I'll try, oh, I can hear myself this better. Okay, so the idea is to help me understand what the intent of each event is. That's the first one. The on-site residencies, sounds like there's going to be 8 people. That would be inclusive of staff. Okay. When I start looking at the residencies, the gatherings, the people working, losing the math isn't working for me as far as the parking goes, unless you do have those 12 ancillary spots in the back, which is a definite request. But I'm not sure if Mike is still on the line. The statement now is that there are 3 spots in the garage, 5 spots, and a pullout on the driveway, and another 7 spots? 12 to the right of the driveway. I think there's a total of 24. But my question is, the garage, I get that exists. Are the other spots delineated as parking spots, or is it just an area that would fit 5 cars? Is this historically 5 parking spots that have always been used as parking spots? Thank you, thank you.
For the applicant.
The applicant, y'all can talk later. So I just want to understand the historical nature of the parking spots, because that now is in the front yard and it's being, in the SLR report, saying it's a pre-existing condition, so I need to understand, is it really pre-existing?
The 4 spots in front of the house, which are actually in front of the house and in the front yard, are parking areas now. People park in those
Okay.
spots. We're not changing anything.
Okay.
And the area adjacent to the garage is not the front yard. It's not the front yard of the site.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm trying to understand. I haven't seen a map, we just got it, so I was trying to look at what my cat on the screen. The other one from understanding, so I reviewed the SLR report that was submitted, but it sounds like the presentation was based on a second version of the SLR report, which was just submitted. There are currently 2 now. Is that the case, or just have the 1?
It's the same report. The one I submitted last night just lacked the name and signature on it. It's the identical report.
Okay, good, thank you. I have to reread it. Okay, that's all I got for now. I have more later, thank you.
I'm gonna try this without this, because I hate it. A couple of things.
This is Andy Rubin.
Thank you, Andy. The parking spaces, the stone area that you created with 12, is that, I'm having trouble visualizing that off the road. Is that in that parcel, that thin parcel of land that's not to be used, or you're not gonna use, you're withdrawing? It's separate to that, it's to the east of that, or west rather?
It is.
Okay, all right.
And there is a curb cut and a gate there now. So if you drive by, you'll see it.
I've seen it there, I just wasn't sure if that was what it is. Okay, thank you. You had mentioned, going back to the events, I just want to be clear, I heard on the larger events, the 150 with the 15 going back and forth with the shuttle, that thing, I heard 2 and I heard 3 events a year. Is it?
I think Dave Sullivan might have said too, our statement of use as amended indicates up to 3 and no more than 1 per month. That's the statement of use that's before the commission.
And part and parcel to that, you talked about people coming in and out in the morning and then, kind of in the afternoon, typical 9 to 5, let's call it. My understanding from, I think back in the March meetings, that these larger events were going to take place at night. That was one of the concerns. Is that no longer the case, or is that just not?
I'm not sure that they're going to take place in the evening. When I think of them, I think of them more as evening events, but I presume they could be during the day. The way the statement of use indicates is that they have to be within the specified hours. Can't go later than 9 on certain days and 10 on certain days. But I suppose there could be an event during the day on a Saturday or weekend. I don't know that we've limited it, but we consider that, you know, if it made sense to people to talk about timing and limitations.
No, I just want to understand, because I've heard both over
But
the
Dave
course
might
of the last
might
few
have
months.
had a point on that
Yeah,
as well.
in the traffic study, we took the worst case scenario, and assumed that the events started during the morning peak hour and ended during the afternoon peak hour. So that when we're evaluating the impact and the level of service, we have the traffic at the same time, the traffic on O'Connell Road is heaviest. So we had no inclination of when it was, but that's just when we,
Echoing Rob's point, I think it would be important to show when you put it in a table, something, the delineation of the events, what the operational definition of those events are, and what the anticipated number of people are at those events, and the associated timing of those events. So we can look at it comprehensively and be able to say, what's going on at what periods of time during the day as it affects traffic flow, school buses, et cetera, et cetera. And that is, to me at least, that's unclear. Maybe unclear to some others, so that could be helpful. With that in mind, again, sorry for all the questions, but the traffic study that was completed, when was that completed? Specifically?
I received the final report yesterday.
No, but when was the time for? You said you measured it for a week, David, correct?
Yeah.
When was that done? Was it done during the school year?
yes,
Okay, so it does take into account the buses that are going through there.
it was May 17th to May 20th.
Okay, that should be good. Yep, okay, thank you. And then, fine. I heard mentioned a few times, sustainability measures, and other improvements. What specifically, what are you thinking of for energy conservation, sustainability, and what are we talking about here?
I'll let Michelle answer that, but it is one of the conditions that Nina suggested that we provide you with more detail on that. And sustainability is one of the 3 prongs of the mission statement of the foundation. So I can let Michelle talk about that further if you care to.
Happy to, you know, so we want to consider everything with relation to the water center area. We want to make sure we are being respectful for all of the water management on the site. So what is green infrastructure or stormwater management measures that we could take to make sure we are protecting all of the flows on the site. And clean energy would be another particular measure that we would look at. So we may look at others, and we are happy to talk more about that, but to give you a sense. Certainly the water management, certainly clean energy.
You're talking about PV on the roofs of the building.
We don't know specifically. I mean, I think we have to look at the historical renovation and whether there are good sites for that. But I think we would look at the most energy efficient types of equipment, mechanical, electrical, but we will look at renewable energy options.
Thank you.
John, here's a quick question for Attorney McKeon. So Nina mentioned that the existing buildings fall under the category of pre-existing non-conforming use, and improvements to a certain degree are allowed. But it sounds like the improvements to special house are going to be fairly significant. So my question is, where's the legal line where those improvements are not allowed? And why doesn't the applicant's proposal cross that line?
I believe that the improvements to the house may very well be significant, but they are interior.
Okay.
And the functionality of the buildings themselves. In terms of additional structures, I don't believe there is any It's the interior functionality of the space and the preservation and restoration of structures that are all significantly compromised right now. So I think you're getting at, are we expanding a non-conforming structure? And I don't see that as happening at all. In fact, some of the structure ancillary to the historic barn may in fact go away. So it might be reducing structure on site or repurposing it, changing its configuration to be more functional. So I don't see any expansion of the structures.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
I have one question on the appraisal.
Sure.
So the assumption was that the foundation is the equivalent of a educational organization. And I think within the site and the proposal, it's more of corporate headquarters event site. There's very little traditional education occurring. So I'm not sure how, I'm struggling with the comparison of the property values around small schools compared to a site like this, which is not a small school. So while the report was done well, it's not working for me.
So, the best comparison that I can have, that you can have, is for me to isolate sites that are in Madison. First, one of which is on the subject street. Doesn't get any better than that. So associated with those that happen to be educational, part of the mission of this foundation is educational. The kind of, explain it, the byproduct of having a school there, you have different things. You have facilities, you have classrooms, you have athletic facilities, you have a gym, a baseball field, a football field, so on and so forth. That translates into usage, traffic, light, so on and so forth. So this is the best that I think probably anyone can do in terms of trying to mirror what will be happening down the road at number 6 Opening Hill Road. The idea was to try to mimic that as best I could. And I think, as opposed to me, going to Teaneck, New Jersey and saying, hey, someone put a foundation over in Teaneck and it's in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And you would say, what does Teaneck have to do with Madison?
I understand.
But you can see from the data, which is unaltered, it's just pure data, that in and around the schools, meaning the country school and the Grove School, there's no material difference in value.
I can also add.
Yeah, Bob, can I follow up on your question, Bob?
Well,
It's directed at the same point that it's comparable neighborhoods. There doesn't seem to be any pre-post data on when these buildings were put up. So I wonder about the relevance. But another question is, the neighborhoods, okay, was the Grove School and Hand and the country school built on land that was zoned residential?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I believe I was going to add on to Mark's comments that, and I see that we need to make this clearer about usage. So when we say gatherings, we mean programmatic. By far, a majority of the convenings that will be meetings and gatherings and even the events will be programmatic in nature. We're a 40-year-old mission-based foundation. So we have a large history of convening nonprofit leaders, sometimes from all across the country, in the kind of programs that we do. We have some of the top neuroscientists working on learning differences, and we often are able to convene those experts. So the nature of the convening is about education. It is about learning. Our primary activities are about learning and education.
that goes back to my previous question, which is I have no idea what the plan is for the events, or the gatherings or anything, so clarity would be great.
So I think, John Morgan again, are you done with is that the energy conservation and sustainability? Is that our additional information on that, or are you going to actually provide some more information?
I will list it out for you.
All right, so in addition to that, I would really love to see some specifics that you see that the idea of encouraging development for the town. If you could provide some specifics on what the foundation sees as, what the advantage to the town is. Either, you mentioned visitors and employment, but what are some specifics around?
Benefit for the town.
Correct.
Are you asking me to answer that question?
No,
now?
no. Again, this was give you some idea of the additional information, like you see.
Understood.
I think we're at a good stopping point, actually. How about we take a break for 5 minutes or so? And then come back and then we'll hand over. Okay, we're recording again. We'd like to get meeting continuing. And I want to, first of all, say thanks to all of you for your patience. I know we've had a lot of questions and you've been a good, quiet audience, so thank you for that. I think we're going to have Aaron start with the sign-up sheet and we'll go in the order of how people signed up. Does that make sense, Aaron? And we'll be bouncing back and forth between us. Yeah,
So just in terms of the process.
Yeah.
You mentioned there would be questions, so the public doesn't get to ask questions, we can read statements.
Oh, you can, I'm sorry, you can ask questions or make statements.
Okay.
Sometimes we separate it between pro and con, but we're not doing that tonight.
You're not.
Yes,
What you said.
the answer is you can ask a question and make your statements in your same opportunity to be heard.
If one person makes a statement and you all agree with that person, it would save time, I think, not to hear the same thing over and over again. And then I think also we'd like to have everyone have a chance to speak before we cycle back and have the same speaker ask another question or make another comment. So we'll see how far we get tonight, and we're also bouncing from room to room. You can see we have a podium and a microphone set up in the other room, so they can see and hear us, we can see and hear them.
What about Zoom?
And Zoom as well, we've got a list
They
of
can raise their hand.
participants here. So I think, but Erin, should we start with a sign-up sheet and go through that?
Yes, I was
And
just
then-
coordinating with Maria, sorry.
We're coordinating between rooms and also with Zoom, you're right, with other participants.
Yes, anyone from Zoom will also have an opportunity. You can use the hand raising feature to do that. And I do have a list, a 2-page list. If there are additional folks who, you decide you want to speak, you're welcome. We'll give an opportunity for that as well. Okay, first,
Is there another process question?
No, it's not.
Okay.
and if you are, if it's a little harder to enunciate, you're welcome to use the microphone as well, and we would encourage it. We just ask that you identify yourself for the record, because we do have to take accurate minutes, and so that would be your name and your address. Most of you have those on here, so I'll just begin. First, we have Attorney Bernard Pellegrino.
And I would like to pass the microphone.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Madam Chair. Bernard Pellegrino, attorney with Pellegrino Law Firm in New Haven, 475 Whitney Avenue. I spoke last time. The only thing I wanted to get into the record before many of the neighbors speak is we and you received these 3 reports. And I think 4 o'clock yesterday, we received the brand new site plan at about 5 o'clock today. And obviously the receipt of all of that information within 24 hours of this meeting has not given us and you, I believe, enough opportunity to understand that. So our request is whenever this ends tonight, and you may be done before 10, that this hearing must remain open so that we can adequately, knowledgeably respond and you can understand what has just been submitted. Thank you.
Next, I have Bruce Lockhart of 24 Indigo Trail.
Well, okay, let me use the.
Yep, you're gonna go right to the
We'll just
podium.
leave the mic on the podium.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
At the first meeting that the Tremaines came to present, which there was only 3 people from our neighborhood, one of your members asked the Tremaines, what does the town get out of this? It gets nothing out of this. They make all the money. You make nothing. It's a tax exempt foundation. The first thing they're going to do is take the house off the tax rolls because they legally can do that as a tax free foundation. So here are the reasons you need to vote this down. You do not represent the Tremaine Tax-Free Foundation. You represent citizens of Madison. Protect them in their way of distinct law that we all abide by. Not exception to those laws by money and power. Point. If you approve this, how can you legally then not approve any other tax-free foundation from buying a home in other existing zoned neighborhoods and doing the same thing? You will never be able to defend it in the courts as they sue you for discrimination. Once you cross the Rubicon, there is no turning back. Once you set a new bar, what is allowed in Madison, every tax-free foundation will be buying up property and taking homes and businesses off your tax rolls. There are already 130 registered tax-free foundations in Madison. By granting them this, you, in essence, will make all other tax-paying citizens to pay more taxes for them. Point. As you said when this was first presented by the Tremaines, quote, your words, I would not want this in my backyard. And another quote, Madison has a declining population for the last 9 years. Yes, this is in our backyard and in your own backyards all over town. Not people from out of town who have no intention to live here, but their only intention is to make money for their decreasing trust fund. Point. We need more families to buy homes and put their children in our schools and spend money in our town. Our new schools need children, not people going to invitation-only parties to raise money for the Tremaines, who they then get back into shuttle buses and go to the parking lots on 95 and head home. Tell me, from your own experience, when you go to a function all dressed up, do you go shopping first in that town, or after the function, do you go shopping? No, you go home as fast as you can to get out of your clothes and go to bed. Closes up between 8 and 9 on weekends. This is why we love this town. Here you'll have 245 people representing this petition, over 140 houses that surround this location. When this gentleman talks about valuations of houses, people bought those houses when those schools were in existence. They sold the schools. They bought the houses knowing that that was what they were buying into. This is a whole different ball of wax. Point. Here's a map showing the neighborhood right there, which you've seen on the screen before. There are many buses carrying 10 to 15 people will create a circulating wagon train from parking lots on 95 up and down country lanes at all hours of the day and night. I know you had nothing to do with the Madison Beach Hotel because you were not on the board then.
They got all kinds of exceptions, but one of them was to run shuttle buses to their hotel from the same parking lots. So how did that work out for the residents surrounding to the Madison Beach Hotel? It didn't. Because you as a town don't have the resources to monitor any exceptions, you give. Look at the exception you gave to the boatyard on our town line 2 years ago. How is that working out? There it sits with a construction trailer and a chain link fence for the last 2 years, sitting next to a land trust property in the middle of the wetlands, an eyesore. Point, at the last presentation, they inform you that every year, the Tremaine Foundation will come before the board and inform you of what they intend to hold as events on the zone residential neighborhood. Chairman Woods said, we have enough on our plate as it is now. And of course, she is right. You work at night, you come here after your normal working hours, and we thank you for your efforts, because I know it takes a lot to do that. So you work for the town of Madison, but now the taxpayers will be expected to have our representatives, you, on this board, go into the catering business for the Tremaines to approve what they intend to do per year. So not only here 3 events, but as much as 12 events of 150 people. This engineer showed you a septic tank that's going to have 150 people on a Friday and a Saturday night, 20 feet from the Neck River. Yeah, I'd like to see that engineered septic tank, how often that's going to fail. Safety. Here are the photos of the area. The first one is an attempt of your tax-paying citizens to walk her dog over that bridge. As you can see, she approaches the bridge, she's getting closer to the bridge, and then here comes the car, and she has to jump into the woods to avoid getting run over by the car and getting her dog run over. Here's the lineup of trucks that sometimes have to form on that bridge because they can't get over that bridge. This is the accident that happened on the bridge. This is the garbage that ended up in the Neck River that remained there for a month until we advertised it, and then finally someone came over to get it out of there. And here is the real reason the Tremaines had you postpone the last meeting. Not the reason of heat. They don't really care about the heat, and they don't give a damn about us and the heat. It was because of this accident to keep us off balance and lose our momentum. So they canceled. The first time they canceled was when the New York Times wrote about their architecture. The second time they canceled is when this accident happened on the bridge. I was the first one on the scene of that accident, coming from lunch. I helped the man, all covered with blood, get out of his car, lay him on the street. I then called 911. What did I get? Well, where's the accident? I said, it's in the middle of the bridge. Well, that's not ours. That belongs to Madison. I said, wait a minute. The guy's bleeding here. He's laying on the ground. Can we get an ambulance? What's your name? What's your address? I'll call up Madison. Took 15 minutes before anybody showed up with the man laying on the ground. Point. At the last presentation, they informed you that every year that will come. Well, I already said that. Sorry. So here are the photos. See how she jumped into the bushes? Okay, I already said that. And so we'll move on to the first scene and help that person. Look at the sharp curve in both directions. And the flooding, which I have now in front of you. That happens 5, 6, 7 times a year. The Neck River floods. And it floods not only the bridge, and it floods the street, but it floods the Tremaine Foundation, their proposed land use. So it's not a environmentally safe area to be putting something of a party venue on Friday and Saturday nights of 150 people. So when they do these parties with 150 people and they have the buses, where do you think the buses are gonna go? Do you think 150 people are all gonna jump on the bus at the 95 parking lot all at one time? No, they're gonna come down all of these roads, and once they drop people off in the front of the house, where will the buses go then? You know where they'll go. They'll go up Indigo Trail in our neighborhood. They'll either turn around or they'll sit at the end of the neighborhood, have a few cigarettes, listen to music, or then they'll come down in Kachina and then back again. So you're gonna have a constant loop of buses to put money in a tax-free foundation. And your citizens in this area gives you $370,000 in taxes. There are no $500,000 homes in this area. These are areas of over $1 million homes. And why did we buy them? Why did we buy the land? Their grandfather made us sign covenants and to specify that only one house was to be built on each lot. No outbuildings, no commercial venues, no nothing. That man loved the Neck River and he loved the country environment. Here comes the foundation. Forget about Grandpa. We want to make money. We need to make money.
Mr. Lockhart, you're approaching 10 minutes, so do you think you could wrap it up?
I have much to say.
And if you have specific questions for the applicant, that would be.
For you, we have questions. For you.
We're not applying.
You're not applying. You're representing us, not them.
We hear you.
Okay, well, that, we take my guy.
You can have
I'm a
mine too.
spokesman,
You have
I'm a
mine
spokesman
too.
for this.
Yeah.
I live in this right in their backyard.
Okay.
Couple more minutes. Point, at your last meeting, you talked extensively about the height of the new construction near Route 1 at Hammonasset package store. You told them after 10 times before this board to think about the height as 34 feet and not 45 feet, even though the lawyer said at least 6 buildings in Madison were higher. But you said not on Route 1. Go back and rethink it. Then about the parking lot of the new restaurant on Route 1, where the Winter Club was. Again, you looked at the plans of the new one, and you were very concerned with the effect of headlights coming out of the parking lots and shining into citizens' home windows at all hours of the night. I thought, good work. You care about the little citizens of this town. So in God's name, how could you even think twice about this invasion of non-citizens into an area of town 7 days a week, and to give money to the tax-free foundation and destroy all of a part of our town's quality of life of over 180 homes with noise, pollution, cars, buses, garbage trucks, tents, drinking, and light pollution. Point, at the Tremaine Foundation open house, it's very important that you should hear this. I was threatened by the chairman of Madison's Economic Development with witnesses. Quote, if you do not allow this to go in, we will put low-income housing there. Then he finished up with, you are only a small part of Madison. You don't matter. Just in our neighborhood, we pay thousands of dollars in taxes, even without your car tax. This is within 800 feet of this home. Then their lawyer said, which I took as a threat to your board in this last meeting, be careful. You can get a sawmill or a farm or a winery here. Is the Tremaine Foundation going to be milking cows and selling milk, or cutting down trees and selling lumber, with the Neck River being polluted by cow manure or sawdust? I spoke to your first select woman at a meeting, and she said she would talk to him. Talk to him? He should be fired. Why talk to him? He threatened us. He should be fired. But wait, get this. He's also the chair of the Shoreline Arts Commission, which in the last few years received donations of $20,000 per year from the Tremaine Foundation. Oh, how convenient. The first meeting, we were only 3 of us citizens present because we only learned it 2 days before. After the Tremaines were working the town over for months. You said you were invited, you said, your board, you were invited to luncheon at the Madison Beach Hotel, but refused to attend because it would be unethical. Yes, it would be unethical. Good for you. You did the right thing.
I don't think any of us were invited.
Well, we'll go look at the tape, because it's on the tape.
Maybe
It
you
was said.
misheard, because I didn't even know about it until we
Well,
had our.
okay, but it's on the tape. It was made on, at that first remark. Why were the Tremaines allowed to present to the Economic Commission well before you even heard of this plan? Who in the town is getting them into meetings with town employees even before you heard of this proposal? Does the town bring other developers to meet with officials before they present their proposal to this board? Is the guy trying to bring a taxable restaurant into town? Was he shepherded around to town officials? Or offering lunch to employees of our town? If this was the case, we do have a violation of the ethics code of Madison. Point. You can tell why we demolished, can you tell me why we demolished the General's house who fought our independence and let the Tremaine Foundation brag about the Nazi? No, it's true. That's the truth.
This is irrelevant
It's
to
published truth.
zoning.
It's published truth.
It's not relevant to.
It's not relevant. No.
It's not relative to planning and zoning.
If you bring that into it, you pollute the whole thing. You just can't talk about that. You can't consider who the.
I'm 3 generations of veterans. My father died in World War II. Okay? And this I have to look at? Wow. Yeah, that's sad.
Aren't they asking for historical landmark? So why is that not relevant? They're asking for historical landmark as part of their
As
application.
part of the application process, we're not allowed to consider who the applicant is.
But they put that into their application,
I know,
how
and
important that
we're
was
trying
for
to
the
not look
restoration
at
and historical value, which by the way, they haven't touched the house yet. Because their grandfather meant so much to them.
Okay, we need one person at a time, and again, Mr. Lockhart, if you could wrap up.
I'm wrapping it up. Citizens have stepped forward to buy this back from the Tremaines and build 3 new homes that would generate $60,000 to $80,000 in new taxes, with families going to 3 schools within 1 mile of this location. This is where a track team runs on its road, where animals cross over and drink in its river. Do the right thing here, as you did, refusing to eat their food at their luncheon. Our group is made up of all walks of life, all religions, all family structures, all races, and all professionals, from CEOs to doctors to hardworking people. We will fight tooth and nail. We don't need an art barn with no art, which she said they didn't have any art. This is masquerading to raise money in a tax-free residential zone neighborhood. Do the right thing and stop the Tremaine circus coming to town. If they wish to teach art, and have them put it in the new academy school that we just spent $19 million to refurbish.
Okay, you're over 15 minutes now, and if
This,
it would be fair
this
to let
has
other
caused
people talk.
citizens
We don't care.
to go to the emergency room. It has caused people to go to doctors. It has disturbed their vacations, using money intended for weddings, tuitions, sleepless nights, and anxiety over their homes and retirement and happiness. Do the right thing and just shut this down.
Name on the list.
Rich Levin from 48 Indigo Trail.
Try not to repeat what already has been
Okay,
said.
tough act to follow. Hi, everybody. I'm Rich Levin, 48 Indigo Trail. First point I'd like to make is, it's not clear to me, and I get the impression it's not clear to Planning and Zoning Committee either, what we're even being asked to approve here. I gotta say, I've been to every one of these meetings so far, and every time I've been here, the special use exception request has been changed. Today, we hear about this parking, which last time we met, there wasn't going to be any new parking on site, and now there is. We've heard about cafes, we've heard about museum stores, that has changed constantly. So I guess until we have an application that's fairly consistent and stays the same, I can't see how you can approve anything. Okay, moving on. As Bruce had mentioned, a lot of people have insinuated that we're just a few people and that don't want this in our backyard. It's NIMBY mentality. So regarding this, I have several points to make. One, as Bruce pointed out, we're not just a few people. There's hundreds of signatures on that petition. There's lots of people, not even in the neighborhood, who have weighed in on this, who don't want this to happen, for the precedent-setting issue that Bruce raised before. And frankly, we don't appreciate feeling gaslighted. The insinuation that we're imagining or over-exaggerating our concerns is insulting, and we won't be silenced. We have proof of our concerns, and we demand that they be considered. Regarding this not in my backyard mentality, again, I think you have it backwards. As Bruce mentioned, Burton G. Tremaine Jr. didn't want anything like this in his backyard. He wrote it down very clearly in 1995 in the Declaration of Restrictive Covenants. Mr. McKeon raised this today. He insinuated that this was neighbors getting together who didn't want things on their own property. No, this was Burton G. Tremaine Jr. saying what he didn't want in his neighborhood. Okay, so we can argue about slivers of land and whether it applies to that sliver or the whole property. This was his intent, plain and simple. He wrote it down. He created Indigo Woods LLC specifically to handle this. And we have all been complying with this for almost 30 years now. Okay, so that has to be taken into consideration. All right, so the benefits versus the risks of the proposed special use. On the risk side, we've heard all about this. Noise, light pollution, traffic, property devaluation, environmental impact, neighborhood disruption, etc. As mentioned, the foundation insinuates that these are non-existent or over-exaggerated, and their evidence, frankly, is tenuous at best. The Planning and Zoning Commission criteria for approval of special use exceptions